Divided heart. Think about a piece of metal being pulled in two different directions at once. It doesn't break cleanly. It warps. It bends in strange, unpredictable ways. The old blacksmith shop smelled of burning coal and hot iron, a smell that got into everything. And a warped piece of metal in that space was recognized immediately as something still at war with itself. Every hammer strike meant resistance going the opposite direction. That's the divided heart. And honestly, it might be the most common condition on this entire list. The Bible talks about a person trying to serve two masters at the same time, God and the world. And on the surface, that sounds manageable, like you can keep both. But the metal doesn't cooperate. You start making promises you can't keep. You show up on Sunday carrying guilt from Saturday night. You pray in the morning and spend the afternoon feeding the exact thing you prayed against. And the weight of that isn't dramatic. It's slow. It's quiet. You can't fully rest because something is always pulling the other direction. You can't be all the way present in anything, prayer, relationships, a quiet evening, because part of you is always somewhere else. That's not a character flaw. That's what happens to any heart trying to honor two completely different loyalties at the same time. Eventually, you stop fully living anywhere. The divided heart isn't necessarily a cold heart. That's the tricky part. It can still feel warmth. It can still cry during worship, but it's always split. James described it as double-minded, unstable in every single way. And when a blacksmith finds a warped piece of metal, the instinct isn't to discard it. The instinct is to reheat it, bring it back to where it's still shapeable. The divided heart needs to return to that place too, back to the fire, where the pull of one thing can finally outweigh the pull of everything else. The question is just which direction you're willing to let win.
Anxious heart. This one is exhausting to carry, genuinely. The anxious heart isn't a heart that's stopped believing. It's a heart that believes but can't stop spinning. It keeps rehearsing worst-case scenarios. It maps out every possible way something could go wrong and then builds backup plans for those. It's a forge fire with no direction, heat going everywhere, burning through everything, but nothing actually getting shaped. And the people who carry this most often aren't the ones who stopped caring. They're usually the most responsible people in the room. The ones who carry the most because they care so deeply about getting things right. The ones who pray the most and sleep the least. They've read the verses about peace. They've highlighted them, said them out loud, and they still wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about the thing. That's not a faith failure. That framing is too simple. It's more like faith fighting very hard against a very loud internal noise that won't quiet down on command. The anxious heart is like a blade sharpened past its edge. It gets thin. It gets fragile. And at some point, the sharpening becomes damage. What it needs isn't more pressure, more information, or more striving. It needs to be set down, held steady, reminded that the blacksmith hasn't lost control, even when everything around it feels completely unsteady.
Prideful heart. This one's sneaky, genuinely sneaky. The prideful heart doesn't walk around announcing itself. It doesn't say, I'm proud. It says, I've worked hard for this. It says, I've earned my place. It dresses itself up in achievement, in reputation, in the appearance of having everything figured out. In the ancient world, pride moved through a room in fine linen and loud title, the official who never needed advice, the teacher who corrected everyone but couldn't receive correction himself. From the outside, it looked like strength. It still does. But here's the thing about pride in metal. It makes the metal resist the hammer. And in real everyday life, that resistance shows up in quieter ways than people expect. It's not being able to apologize first, even when you know you're wrong. It's performing competence in a room where you're quietly drowning. It's why burnout goes unnamed for so long, because admitting you're empty feels like admitting failure, and pride decided somewhere along the way that failure is simply not an option. A proud heart doesn't want to be shaped. It's convinced it's already in its final form. The Bible doesn't dance around this one. Pride goes before destruction. It says that plainly. Not sometimes, not under certain conditions. Before. Like a guaranteed sequence every single time. The prideful heart often feels the most alive, the most certain, the most energized. But that certainty is a wall. And behind that wall usually is something fragile that was buried a long time ago. Something that never healed. The pride grew over it like a shell. And now it's protecting something that actually needs to be exposed.
Hardened heart. The hardened heart is probably the one most people picture first when this topic comes up, and for good reason. It shows up the most dramatically in Scripture. Think of Pharaoh, the Nile running red, livestock dead in the fields, darkness thick enough to feel with your hands, watching everything around him come apart and still refusing to move. That's not casual stubbornness. That's a heart that decided so firmly, or has been through so much, that it stopped responding entirely. In metalworking, a hardened heart is metal cooled too fast, too soon. The shaping wasn't finished, but the cooling happened anyway. It looks solid, it feels strong, but under real pressure, it doesn't bend, it shatters. And here's what people miss about how hardening actually happens in a real life. It rarely starts with rebellion. More often it starts with repeated disappointment, prayers that felt unanswered, trusting someone who turned out not to be safe. Staying soft kept getting you hurt, and hardening felt like the only reasonable response. The numbness that followed read almost like peace, and that's exactly the danger. Feeling nothing can look a lot like stability, until the moment it can't hold anymore. Wherever the hardness lives, that part stops growing entirely. You can be hardened in one area while staying soft in others, but the hardened part is frozen, and frozen things don't grow. The blacksmith's answer is always the same: heat. The same fire that felt too intense the first time is the only thing that can make the metal workable again.
Deceitful heart. The prophet Jeremiah said something that should genuinely stop anyone in their tracks, that the heart is deceitful above all things. Not sometimes deceitful, not deceitful when under pressure, above all things. That's a staggering claim. In the ancient world, the heart wasn't merely symbolic, it was considered the actual seat of thought, will, and intention. To say it was deceitful above all things was to say the very instrument you use to evaluate yourself cannot be fully trusted. Sit with that for a second. And here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. The deceitful heart doesn't always lie to other people. Half the time, it's most convincingly lying to itself. It talks you into things you know are wrong, but frames them so reasonably that they feel almost responsible. It rewrites your motives so your selfishness looks like wisdom. It keeps you comfortable in a compromise while whispering that it's just not the right season yet. Think about the decisions you've made in the last year that you justified brilliantly in the moment, and only later saw clearly for what they actually were. That's not stupidity. That's the deceitful heart doing exactly what Jeremiah said it does. In the blacksmith shop, this is the metal that looks clean in the dark, but reveals its true grain under the right light. You think you've got solid iron until the heat shows you the cracks. And the cracks were always there. The terrifying part is that self-awareness alone doesn't fix it. You can know the heart is deceitful and still be deceived by it. That's why the psalmist's request wasn't for sharper self-insight. It was, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." Because the heart can't fully audit itself. You need someone outside the metal to read what's really in it.
Pricked heart. Now this one is different, really different. The pricked heart isn't broken, not yet. It's been pierced. There's a sharp entry point where something true got through the armor. In the book of Acts, there's a crowd that hears Peter speak about Jesus, and the text says they were cut to the heart, not intellectually persuaded, not mildly moved, cut. Like a blade found the gap in the defense and went all the way in. You felt this. The sermon that landed somewhere too specific to be coincidence. The conversation that stayed with you 3 days later, living quietly in the back of your mind, refusing to leave. The verse you've read dozens of times that suddenly, on an ordinary afternoon, carried a weight it never had before, and you had to set the page down and just sit with it for a moment. That sting is actually a gift. It means the heart hasn't gone cold. There's still softness in there, still an opening. The blacksmith recognizes this moment. It's the instant after the hammer connects, and the metal gives just slightly. There's a window, and it doesn't stay open forever. The pricked heart is standing at a crossroads. It can lean into the wound and let it become something real, or it can close back up and build a thicker wall over that tender place. What happens in the days right after the sting matters more than most people realize, more than almost anything else in the whole journey.
Broken heart. People sometimes read broken as the worst condition on this list, the most defeated, the most hopeless. And from inside a broken heart, that's exactly what it feels like the floor gave out, like everything you'd quietly managed to hold together finally came apart at once. There's a rawness to real brokenness that doesn't dress up well. No polished answers, no managed presentation, just a person sitting in the rubble of something they can't fix. And many people in that place carry the added weight of shame, the quiet sense that a broken heart is proof of failure, evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with them. But actually, and stay with me here, a broken heart in the biblical sense isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the real one. Psalm 51 was written by David after one of the most devastating moral failures of his life. He had blood on his hands. He had betrayed trust on a scale that should have ended him. And in that psalm, he says something that reshapes the entire picture, that a broken and contrite heart God will not despise. Think about that. Of everything God could have said he values, he chose the broken one, not the polished one, not the performing one. In the blacksmith shop, the moment the metal has been broken back down is precisely when the most creative work becomes possible. The blacksmith isn't looking at a ruined piece. He's looking at raw material, ready, waiting. The broken heart is terrifying from the inside, but it's also the most honest state a heart can be in. No more armor, no more performance, just the real thing, sitting in the fire with nothing left to hide behind, and everything still ahead.
Pure heart. Here's the one everyone wants, but very few people understand correctly. The pure heart isn't a heart that's never been through anything. That's not purity, that's inexperience. And that confusion has done real damage to real people. The idea that holiness means being untouched, unscarred, kept away from the hard parts of human life. In the ancient refining process, the metal wasn't protected from heat. It was placed directly into it. Sustained, controlled fire, until everything impure rose to the surface and could be taken away. The purity came through the process, not around it. A pure heart, in the way the Bible means it, is a heart that has been refined, pressed, tested, and come through the other side without contamination. What's left is clean, focused, undivided in purpose. Jesus said the pure in heart will see God, present tense, active. Like purity creates a kind of clarity that lets you perceive things others simply can't reach. And for anyone who has carried secret motives, hidden wounds, or a version of themselves they've been quietly managing, the invitation of the pure heart isn't to pretend those things away. It's to bring them into the fire and let the heat do what heat does. People with pure hearts aren't naive. Naive is completely the wrong word. They're not sheltered or untested. They've just been honest with themselves and honest with God long enough that there's nothing left to hide. The fire did its work. The impurities came up, got named, got removed, and what remained is something the blacksmith can genuinely use. Not because it's impressive, because it's clean. There's a steadiness that radiates from the pure heart, not the steadiness of someone pretending everything is fine, but of someone who has been real for long enough that pretending stopped being an option.
Steadfast heart. The steadfast heart is the one that's been through the fire more than once and came back. Not without scars, not perfectly unchanged, but with a consistency that doesn't collapse every time the temperature shifts. In ancient Hebrew, the word behind steadfast carried the weight of something anchored at the foundation, not just stabilized at the surface, but set, decided. David kept returning to this phrase, "My heart is steadfast," and it's worth pausing on who was actually saying it. This was a man chased through wilderness, betrayed by his own son, hollowed out by guilt and grief and the weight of choices he couldn't undo. He wasn't describing a life without turbulence. He was describing a heart that found its anchor in the middle of turbulence. Think about someone you know like that, the person you call when things fall apart. They don't get swept up with you. Their steadiness didn't come from easy circumstances. It came from choosing the same anchor so many times it became instinct. And that kind of groundedness is something you can feel in a room. In the blacksmith shop, the steadfast heart is a piece that's been through enough cycles, heat, shaping, cooling, reheating, that it knows what it's made of. It doesn't panic in the furnace because it's been in the furnace before. That's not arrogance. That's forged memory. The steadfast heart doesn't need the circumstances to be perfect before it commits. It doesn't wait for the feeling before it moves. It's learned to act from something deeper than emotion. Not emotionless, just not ruled by emotion either. And honestly, the steadfast heart might be the most valuable thing you can offer the people around you. When everything is shaking, there's something grounding about being near a heart that has genuinely decided where it stands.
Fleshy heart. This is the one the Bible calls the goal. Not the heart of stone, not the warped, divided, or brittle metal. The fleshy heart, the heart of flesh, is what God said he would give when true transformation actually takes hold. Ezekiel records God making this promise to a people who had gone far and hard and were living in the wreckage of choices they couldn't reverse. Into that place, not a moment of spiritual high, not a clean starting point, God made a promise of replacement. And flesh here doesn't mean weak or fragile. It means alive, responsive, sensitive to touch. A heart that can actually feel what it's meant to feel, respond the way it was designed to respond, and move toward what it was created to move toward. It bleeds when it's supposed to bleed. It rejoices when there's something real to rejoice about. It isn't performing those responses. It's genuinely having them. And for anyone who has spent years managing how they appear, showing up in ways that looked healthy while something underneath was still quietly hurting, the fleshy heart isn't about getting it all together. It's about getting it all real. In the blacksmith metaphor, this is the finished piece. Not because it's been through nothing, because it's been through everything and emerged as something genuinely useful, soft enough to be responsive, strong enough to hold its shape under real pressure. The fleshy heart isn't where this journey starts. It's what the whole journey is working to produce. And the most quietly remarkable thing about all of this, across every condition, every crack, every hardened or warped piece, is that the blacksmith never throws the damaged metal away. He just keeps working it, until what started as raw, broken, or resistant material finally becomes exactly what it was always meant to be.